Welcome back to Truth Tellers Mike. Welcome to the spiritually devoted, the prayerful, the discerning, the seekers, the seers, the healers, the empaths, the mystics, the truth tellers, the sacred souls, the spiritually sensitive, the deeply reflective, and those who have committed themselves to walking with wisdom, reverence, integrity, and spiritual discipline. Welcome. You need to know that the gatekeeper is also a trickster. But what he's doing is he's teaching you how to find another way. Most people imagine the gatekeeper as an obvious obstacle, a person who says no, a door closed, an institution refusing entry, a supervisor without allowing an opportunity, a family member refusing support, someone standing between you and the place you believe you are supposed to reach. And because the gatekeeper is usually presented as an obstacle, you naturally assume the spiritual lesson is simple. Defeat the gatekeeper and you will get through the door. But awakening eventually introduces you to a far stranger possibility. What if the gatekeeper was never only guarding the door? What if the gatekeeper was also studying how badly you needed that particular door to open? Because there is another side to this archetype, an older side and a much darker side, a side that is found throughout mythology, folklore, religion, initiation stories, and human psychology. The gatekeeper can also behave like a trickster. And the trickster does not always stop you through force. Sometimes the trickster stops you by making you misunderstand the entire situation. The trickster distracts. He turns you around. He points in another direction. And he confuses. He provokes. He tempts. He creates alternate routes and turns your certainty upside down, and sometimes destroys the very thing you were trying so desperately to preserve. Sometimes destruction is how an obsolete world loses its authority over you, because some of the people you thought were preventing your life from happening may have unintentionally forced you to discover a life you would never have considered while their door remained open. Think about that. You may have wanted employment there. They would not let you advance. You wanted acceptance there. They kept moving the goalpost. You wanted partnership there. They made belonging conditional. You wanted approval. They kept you proving yourself. And for a long time, you believed the spiritual battle was between you and them. You thought if they would simply stop interfering, I could become all whom I am supposed to become. But you're inside of an awakening. And now you're asking, why was I so convinced that my future depended on their permission for me to continue, for me to advance, for me to belong? And now the gatekeepers in your life is beginning to lose power. Now, every time they block a route, something inside you will become more inventive. Every time they withhold something that is rightfully yours, another ability will surface. Every time what is known to you, what you're used to, what you're comfortable with disappears, your mind will start searching beyond the walls. And this is why the gatekeeper can be both destructive and creative. The destruction is obvious. A gatekeeper can cost you time, relationships, opportunities, reputation, resources, and they can make certain seasons unnecessarily difficult. Some gatekeepers enjoy their position. They enjoy deciding who enters and who waits, who receives information, who receives favor, and who remains outside. Power can seduce people, especially when they begin believing that controlling the gate means controlling the destiny of everyone standing before it. Sometimes the gatekeeper becomes so committed to keeping you outside that they accidentally teach you something they never intended for you to learn. And now you're realizing you don't need to enter through that gate. You don't need to walk through a particular door. You do not require their support. The person blocking you believes the greatest threat would be you somehow getting past them. They may never consider the possibility that you could stop wanting what they guard. And once that happens, everything changes. Because a gatekeeper only has authority inside a world where the gate still remains, where it matters. You cannot control someone with admission to a room they no longer desire to enter. You cannot threaten someone with exclusion after they discover another way. You cannot manipulate someone through approval after they stop organizing their identity around being approved. And this is why awakening can initially feel like destruction, as though nothing is working. Everything is coming apart by the seams. Old doors close, roles collapse, relationships become what you are not accustomed to. Environments that once felt secure now feels restrictive. People who once seemed so important begin looking ordinary to you, and you may wonder, why is everything being dismantled at the exact moment I am becoming more spiritually aware? Because spiritual awakening is not always the process of receiving more. Sometimes it is the process of discovering how much of your former life depended on things that were never truly free. The gatekeepers expose that. And the trickster element makes the exposure difficult to detect, because the trickster rarely arrives saying, "I am here to teach you." The trickster appears looking like inconvenience, the insults, the delays, the unfairness, the hypocrisy, the lies, the deception, the rejection, sometimes even humiliation. And you do not recognize the lesson because you are too focused on the offense. And that is understandable. When someone interferes with something meaningful to you, your first thought usually is not, what magnificent spiritual education is happening here, right? You think, why are they doing this? But years later, you may look backward and realize something almost disturbing. Their refusal forced a decision. Their betrayal revealed information. Their dishonesty removed an illusion. Their interference introduced you to your own resourcefulness. Their closed doors made you investigate possibilities you did not previously consider or ignore. And now you have to hold two truths at once. What they did may have been wrong, and yet what you discovered because of it may have become invaluable. Throughout your awakening in your spiritual journey, it doesn't require you to pretend that harm is holy, but it means refusing to let harm have the final interpretation. The gatekeeper may have intended limitation, but intention does not determine final outcome. And this is where creativity enters your spirit. Some of the greatest reinventions of your life will begin after someone says, you cannot come through here. There is something almost outdated. It's old about what happens next, because the human spirit starts studying the walls. Where do they begin? Where does this end? Who built them? Why were the challenges placed before me? Who benefits from me believing that their denial will be permanent in my life? Is there another way? Is there another path, another door? And do I even belong where I believe I'm to go? And then you wonder, well, what exists beyond the gatekeeper? What is that system? What is the gate containing? Because now you are awakening. Because the first stage of freedom is often wanting the gatekeeper to approve you. The next stage is learning how the gatekeeper operates. And then there's another stage beyond both. It is the moment when you realize the gatekeeper was guarding something you have spiritually outgrown, because you may have spent years trying to earn entrance into something that your future would eventually require you to leave. You were fighting for a seat inside a place your soul could not remain. And this is why some doors become harder to open as awakening continues. Not every difficulty is spiritual opposition. Some things that are difficult is information. Sometimes the struggle itself is revealing that you have been pushing against the wrong entrance. The gatekeeper trickster makes this difficult because the situation can trigger even your pride. They insult your capability and suddenly you want to prove your potential. They question your value and suddenly you want to demonstrate value. They exclude you and suddenly inclusion becomes the prize. Be careful, because now the gatekeeper is determining your destination by provoking your ego. And this is one of the oldest tricks at the door. Someone makes you feel unworthy of entering, so you spend years trying to enter merely to prove you were worthy all along. But what if proving yourself requires you to remain attached to a place that was never worthy of you? Some doors require persistence. Some doors require patience. Some doors require you to prepare, get training, take courses, go back to school. And some doors should be left closed. Wisdom is knowing the difference. There is another secret, though, about the trickster. The trickster frequently creates disturbances because disruption reveals what ordinary circumstances hide. You learn who people are when plans fall apart. You learn who respects you when you stop being useful. You learn who loves you when you stop being easy to control. And you learn what you believe when familiar or previously accepted explanations stop working. The gatekeeper creates a threshold, and thresholds expose people, including you. Because standing before the closed door eventually reveals what you worship. Do you worship acceptance, status, belonging, money, being understood, being invited, being needed, and being selected? The gate cannot reveal those things while it remains open. Sometimes only the closed gate shows you how much of your identity was waiting on the other side. God begins separating your identity from doors and people and titles and systems, from environments that once told you who you were. And during the process, the gatekeeper may appear to be winning, but they are not always winning. Sometimes they are simply standing at the scene where your dependence is dying. This is why you should never evaluate your life only by what refused you. Look at what the refusal produced. You became more discerning, more inventive and prayerful, even more observant, and more willing to question what everyone else accepted automatically. You may discover abilities you would never have developed while being comfortably admitted. The gate became an initiation. Some gatekeepers eventually realize what happened. They wanted you outside, but they wanted you outside and still dependent on the world they controlled. They expected you to remain nearby the gate, watching, waiting, hoping, asking again, trying to earn your way back. What they did not expect was transformation. They did not expect you to build. They did not expect you to create. They did not expect you to become uninterested in their permission. Because the gatekeeper's deepest power is not the ability to close the door. It is convincing you that there is nowhere else to go. In an awakening, that illusion breaks and the entire relationship changes. You become indescribably detached. You are not angry anymore. You are simply finished negotiating with doors that require you to diminish yourself in order to enter. You stop campaigning. You're not going to consider selling your soul. Stop trying to convince people who benefit from not being true to you. And something surprising appears when their frustration held on. You became creative. And now you begin making things, teaching, writing, building a community, developing new skills, starting new work, forming healthier relationships with other people, exploring ideas that previously seemed impossible. The closed door becomes raw material. And this is how the destructive gatekeeper unintentionally becomes part of creation. They demolished one future. You constructed another. They removed one road. You learned to navigate. They withheld their world, their profession. You discovered yours. And perhaps this is why Scripture contains so many stories where people meet God near thresholds and wildernesses and departures, betrayals, prisons, deserts, crossings, and closed circumstances. Transformation rarely begins in a place where everything continues exactly as expected. Sometimes the disruption itself becomes the doorway. And during your awakening, you learn what you now need. And you're asking, how did this particular gate hold so much emotional authority over me? What if the gatekeeper does not know that by closing the door, they are forcing you to discover the one they cannot control? Because every gatekeeper eventually reaches the boundary of their jurisdiction. There's always a place where their authority ends. A room they do not own, a role they cannot close, a gift they did not give you, a future they cannot cancel, a calling they cannot authorize. And sometimes your awakening is simply the long, painful discovery of that truth. The gatekeeper thought they were deciding whether you entered, but heaven may have been teaching you something else. Never confuse anyone else's gate with God's entire world. The door may be closed. The institution may have said no. The relationship may end. The invitations may dry up and never come again. The person standing there may believe they have stopped you, but the gatekeeper has one limitation they don't even understand. They can guard an entrance. They cannot guard every direction. And once the awakened soul understands that, the trick is over. The gate becomes a small thing, insignificant, and the world becomes larger. And you finally walk away from the door or doors you once begged to enter, prayed to enter. And you are not defeated, you are not bitter, you are simply awake. Thank you for visiting my channel. May your soul be blessed. Stay covered, stay conscious, stay undefeated. And I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.